Oh, hey. I was just up there on the bed doing overlandy things, using these Vanguard steps on our Gladiator bumper. This thing's pretty rad. I mean, it's got the side protection there, got a spot for a receiver hitch underneath that flippable license plate down there, D-ring mounts, lights. You can have one carrier, you can have two carriers. You can swap the carriers around with a tire, with jerry cans, the traction boards, the high lift jacks. Put anything you want up here. Or just take them off. You don't need them, just take them off. Throw them in the garage, forget about it. Thing's pretty rad. Oh, you want to see how to install it? Let's get this beautiful beast on. The first thing you want to do is remove your spare tire. That is if you are mounting it on our tire carrier. If you're not mounting it on our tire carrier on our bumper, then you can just, go ahead and leave your tire where it's at. And if you don't know how to remove your tire, I'll point you to your owner's manual, which should be in your glove box. Good talk. Now you want to remove your license plate. This is also very technical. Just use a screwdriver or whatnot. Pull this off. You're smart, you know how to do this. Why am I telling you? You want to use a 16mm socket to remove these two bolts underneath your license plate. On the opposite side of this plug over here is a little button. You're going to want to push that. This is for your trailer wiring. Push that button and then wiggle the plug off. Then grab a screwdriver or a trim tool, and you're going to want to snap this fitting off the bumper for this trailer wiring here. And then up under here as well, it's going to be kind of difficult to see, but there's a clip for the bumper wiring and a clip for the trailer wiring underneath that bar. Go ahead and pull that. Go ahead and pop this clip here so the trailer wiring is free. Pop this clip here for the rest of the bumper wiring. Red little safety clip there needs to come out. And then push the button in and pull this harness apart. These are always super fun. Come on. Yeah, bugger. There we go. And then on the trailer plug itself, there'll be two metal clips, and you'll need to push those in. You can use a screwdriver or whatever. Push those clips in, and then this whole plug will push through the face of the bumper, just like that. If you have the factory backup sensors, you're going to have another plug for that somewhere in here as well. We don't have that option, so I'm not sure where it is. But just go ahead and disconnect that plug just like you did the license plate wiring and the trailer wiring. Go ahead and disconnect that plug and pull the whole harness off with the bumper. All right, so we have the factory receiver option, so yours may not look like this, but what we're trying to do is get down to the bare frame. So we're trying to remove the bumper and the receiver, or if you don't have a receiver, your bumper and your bracket. So the first thing we're going to do is get a 21mm socket, and we're going to pull down 2 bolts per side on each frame rail from underneath. 21mm. Now with that same 21mm socket, we're going to remove these 2 bolts on each side. You might want to leave one in loosely on each side so the bumper just doesn't fall off. But we'll get these as far out as we can, and then we'll pull the whole bumper off. Go team. Now we need to remove the wiring harnesses from the factory bumper. That's going to be the wiring for the license plate lights and the wiring for the backup sensors if you have them. So the license plate lights have a little clip where they attach to the light mounting bracket. So go ahead and press in the fitting on that clip and pull it out. I can't really show you how to do that because it's so tiny, but there's just a little button that you push and these pop out like that. And then we're going to pop off all of these Christmas tree type fasteners for this harness, just to extract this harness off the bumper. Do the same thing for your backup sensors, but be careful with the backup sensor plugs. They can be kind of difficult, and don't break your backup sensors. You have to remove them from the bumper. Don't break them when you do that. About your backup sensors, depending on which rear bumper you have, you may need to purchase some little grommets to install those in our bumper. We'll have the part numbers on our website for what grommets you need to do that. Now we're going to prepare this bumper to be installed. So the wings come separate, and there's some adjustability in these, but really what we're looking to do is get the top and the outside surface flush on the bumper. So we're going to give you some 1/2-inch hardware here with a washer and a 1/2-inch flange nut. We're going to give you 2 of these per side. So go ahead and push those through the inside of the bumper and then put the wing on. I can do this one-handed blindly. And as I said, go ahead and make sure these are flush on the top and on the outside, and you can tighten them down. You can leave these loose and tighten them down when the bumper is on the Jeep if you want some more adjustability, but it's easier to tighten them down on the floor. After you get this side done, go ahead and repeat the process on the opposite side. On the LED lights, you can install them now or when the bumper's on the Jeep. There's tons of access, but just know that you may have to add some spacers or adjust these brackets depending on the brand of your lights to make sure that they're centered in the slot. So we've given you a slot on the bumper to center it forward and back, and most lights have a slot to forward it from side to side. So you should be able to get these pretty much perfectly aligned in the holes. All right, now with a friend or a jack that's pretending to be your friend, you're going to want to go ahead and put this bumper into position. I would suggest just grabbing one of the 5/8 bolts and a washer per side and just loosely putting it through the side holes on the bumper once you kind of get it where you need to be. You can hang the whole bumper right off one bolt while you're trying to get it in position. So your bolt's going to be, slightly shorter than this, but go ahead and grab another washer and a lock nut, and then you can put the other bolt in with a washer and a lock nut. Now we're going to mount these side brackets. You could technically do this before the bumper gets installed, but I think it's easier to just do it afterwards. So you're going to have to kind of sneak it in there. So I like to come from the front here with the bracket, slide it up above this bumper wing here, and then it has to go underneath or between our bracket and the frame. So go ahead and push the bumper up like that, and you can slide it up in there. Then we're going to give you these graded metric bolts here with washers. You're going to go through the bottom, through both plates, and I would suggest leaving everything pretty loose right now, just so we can adjust everything and then tighten down all the bolts. Go ahead and twist the bumper down. This is why you wanted to leave those other bolts loose. Twist the bumper down and then slide this in here like that, and then loosely install the 2 bottom bolts. Now we're going to bolt the sides of these wing supports on. I didn't mention it before, but you might want to put some anti-seize on all these bolts if you live in a climate where that's necessary. We're going to give you some metric bolts, look like about 35 millimeter-ish, 30 millimeter. And those are going to go into the side of the frame. There's some threaded holes there. There's 2 of these bolts per side on these wing supports. So I'm just going to leave those loose like everything else. And then on the wing itself, 5/16 button heads and flange nuts, 3 of those per side. So go ahead and feed those up through the bottom and add your flange nuts to the top. And repeat this process on the opposite side, and then we'll line the bumper up to the Jeep. All right, so this bumper is designed to have a little bit of movement fore and aft like this. It doesn't have a ton of movement passenger and driver just because of the way the frame mounts are. But if you find that your bed isn't centered, it's likely that your bed is just installed off center on the frame. There's some adjustability in those, so you can loosen up the bed mounts and slide the bed either way, forward, backward, side to side, to kind of center it up where you want. Then you can kind of pick here on how far out or in you want the bumper. I like to pull it just as far out as I can, just to gain clearance for tire carriers and stuff like that. So once this is all centered up and squared away, we can go underneath and we can tighten and torque all those bolts. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to torque everything underneath here. This is very important for everything to be safe for towing and such. So we're going to torque these bottom bolts and the side bolts, the grade 8 bolts and the 10.9 metric bolts. Both get torqued to 120 foot-pounds. So 120 foot-pounds for these, 120 foot-pounds for these. These side bolts here, these 8.8 grade metric bolts, these are going to get torqued to 35 foot-pounds. And then these just tighten up. These are stainless, so you don't want to go crazy on them. So just tighten these up snug, 35 foot-pounds, 120, 120, 120, 120. Do that on both sides. I forgot to tell you about socket sizes. Sorry about that. 17 millimeter socket for the smaller metric bolts on the side, 5/16 socket and end wrench for the larger grade 8 bolts here, 22 millimeter for these metric bolts underneath, and 3/16 hex head or T-handle for these right here. So if you have backup sensors, we're going to cut to a clip of how you're going to install those on the JL. So we'll cut to that and bring you back here. If you don't have backup sensors, I'll show you how to handle that in a second. All right, we're going to start with the passenger outside. Take the thickest part of the bezel and point it outwards. You'll see some notches in the bumper that it's made to go into. Go ahead and push that in. Sometimes you need a rubber mallet to get it to sit flush. Then once that's flush, put your sensor in from the back. Then on the inside, you're going to see a slightly larger opening, and that is where the connector side goes. So just go ahead and push those in, and you'll see both of those clip together just like that. Now you can reattach these safety clips if you like, but it might be kind of a fight to get them back on there. There we go, not too bad. Now in the exact same way, go ahead and do the rest of the sensors. Now we're going to go ahead and reconnect this wiring harness. Remember, the connector goes on the driver's side. We're going to clip it in, all of the sensors, leave it kind of loose for now. We'll have to find some places to zip tie it on the frame and on the body once we get it installed. There's going to be a little bit of extra wire, but that's fine. Like I said, we'll zip it once we get the bumper installed. A quick word, depending on your wiring harness, this might not be quite long enough to reach. So what we're going to have to do is take this tape and just unwrap some of it. We're just going to have to unwrap some of this harness. We may have to start up with the license plate too. We're just going to get ourselves a little extra wire, and then we'll retape it back up again. This is really just depending on your individual Jeep because it's really close, so you may not need to worry about this. All right, so what I did was I unwrapped this license plate light tape right there, and I unwrapped the tape right here just to get me, it's like about an inch or an inch and a half extra wire for this sensor. I'm going to go ahead and pull that back and then re-tape up this. And since I don't need this license plate sensor, or light, sorry, license plate light, it's probably a really great idea to tape this up watertight so it doesn't short that circuit out. So we'll just tape that right to the harness. And now that I have enough wire there, I will tape this junction here just to protect these wires for that sensor. Good to go. Right now we're going to go ahead and pop in our trailer wiring. So that just snaps into this hole here, just like that. and then we can grab the wiring that we removed from the back and we can plug that in, and then you can zip tie this harness up or however you want to route it so that it stays nice and tucked up. So if you don't have backup sensors, you're going to have these little caps in the kit. They look just like our powder coat. They blend right in. They snap in, but I like to add a little dab of RTV just on the back flange, just so it kind of holds them in a little more securely. So go ahead and pop in the 4 of those, and we'll move on to the license plate. Now that we're talking about caps and RTV, if you're not running our carriers at all, we're going to provide 4 of these caps, these larger ones for you. And these are to plug the spindle sleeve hole so no water or debris gets in there so it doesn't rust. So I would RTV these pretty well because you don't want any moisture in there. RTV these caps and then just go ahead and push them on the top and on the bottom as well. On both sides or on one side or whatever you're going to do. If you're going to run both carriers right now, you don't need to worry about this. Now we're going to install the license plate bracket. There's going to be a hinge here. It's going to have a thinner section right there and kind of a thicker section. You can see it right there. There's a screw here to adjust the tension on the thicker section of the hinge itself. It's like a friction adjustment. You want that side to go into the bumper. So the friction adjustment side goes into the bumper. So we'll do that first. So button head bolt through the top. And then you're going to have to give it the old reach around up in here and get this flange nut on. I'm using the 5/16 hardware here, so the larger of the button head hardware. And then just kind of line up that flange nut from underneath. Now you're going to take the other 5/16 button heads and this license plate bracket here. This little bend faces out. And go ahead and set that on top of the hinge. Go ahead and pull this down to the bottom of its adjustment and then tighten it with a 3/16 hex, T-handle, socket, whatever. Just like that. And then we're going to give you some 1/4-inch button heads and flange nuts to attach your license plate to this frame. For the license plate light, we're going to give you this little LED one here. It sticks on with this 3M tape. The backing is kind of a pain to get off. I use a razor blade or an X-Acto knife, and I just kind of pierce it somewhere in the center of the backing and then just pry up from the center. And usually that works pretty well, just to take the backing off and not take the adhesive off as well. So once you get that backing off, you can go ahead and just stick it on this bend here on the license plate bracket itself. And once that's stuck on, we'll handle the wiring. Okay, so I've already plugged in our license plate light factory wiring harness here. Now we're going to need to cut off a bunch of excess and cut off this connector here. So I think it's long enough to use. Yeah, we'll cut off this. This is the original driver's side connector. We're going to trim that off, and then we are going to just tape off those connections. And then I'm going to give myself just a little extra here. So we'll come maybe 1, 2, what is that? Maybe 10 inches from that cut. And we'll trim that there as well. So then we don't need these little clips anymore, body clips anymore. So we'll go ahead and cut off these little connectors that went into the frame and the factory bumper because we don't need those so much anymore. Just clean the wiring up a lot. Okay. And then we're going to unwrap some of this factory tape here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull this through the top of the bumper just to make sure that we've got enough material here for what I'm doing. And you don't have to cut this, this driver side connector off. Technically, you could just tape over the connector itself, but we're not going to use it anymore, and I like to just waterproof it if I can. So you can get some of this heat shrink tubing that has a sealant inside of it, so once it shrinks down, it actually seals as well. And then go ahead and put that over the ends of the wires for the connector that you cut off and leave yourself a little extra hanging over. And then you can shrink this and then once it gets hot enough to melt the glue, you can use some pliers or your fingers if you don't feel anything anymore, and just press it together and press that sealant together. Pliers make this a little less hurty. So go ahead and do that on that connector. And then on the wires that we actually need, what we're going to do is we're going to strip those wires. There's a black and a white blue stripe on here, like that. We'll twist these up like that. We will cut, we don't need all of this on this light, so we'll just cut maybe, what is that, 10 inches, 12 inches of that light wire, and we'll separate these, and we'll strip these. Be careful, these wires are very fine. We'll strip those wires. So I'm going to use a expandable wire loom on here, but if you have just the split loom, you won't have to do this step ahead of time, but I'm going to grab some of this expandable loom here. So in the kit, we're going to provide you the license plate light and these heat shrink connectors. The wiring loom and tape and whatever else you want to use is up to you, kind of whatever you feel is necessary. We're going to go ahead and crimp these butt connectors onto the factory wiring. And then onto the license plate LED. So we're going to go black to black and red to white blue stripe. Now these are just the colors that are on our Gladiator. Who knows between models and years if Jeep's going to change the colors. So this is just a guide on what our Gladiator is using for colors, but you may want to verify yours with a voltmeter or a test lamp or whatever just to make sure you've got the right wires. But on ours, black goes to black and red goes to white stripe or white blue stripe. Now, if you wanted to put your license plate in your spare tire, if you're going to run a carrier with a spare tire on it, you could just extend these wires longer. Once you're down to here, you can kind of put this license plate light wherever you like. So once you have those crimped, you're going to grab a lighter or a hairdryer or a heat gun, and you're going to go ahead and shrink these crimp connectors. On the smaller wire, you may have to pinch it closed to get the sealing stuff to seal totally on the wire. You'll probably want to use pliers for this, but it's kind of hot. All right, so once we have that taken care of, I'm going to use, like I said, expanding loom on here, so I'm going to run my loom down. But if you have a split loom or tape or whatever, you'd want to deal with that now. And then you can go ahead and just route these wires however makes the most sense for you and zip tie it on the back of the bumper. So you want to give yourself a little bit of a pigtail here, obviously for the license plate to hinge up and down. That's pretty good. And then you can start to zip it behind this bolt if you want to tie your loom up, and then behind the bumper as well. All right, so if you're installing one of our adventure carriers or both of our adventure carriers, the first step is going to be to bolt on this plate right here. So this just bolts right on the top. There is a spot for some countersunk bolts, so you're going to make it facing so the countersunk holes are up, 1/4 inch countersunk bolt, and then you'll reach underneath here and kind of contort your hand around to put this lock nut on the bottom. You can do it. I have faith in you. So do that for both bolts. And now I'm going to send you to our universal install video for the adventure carriers. It's on a Toyota. I'm sorry that you're going to have to just deal with that. But our adventure carriers are identical across all the platforms. So we're going to go to that video, and then you can kind of see how to install those adventure carriers. If you have any questions about this product or any product here at JCR Off-Road, give us a call, 269-353-1184, or email us at info@jcroffroad.com. Thank you so much for becoming part of the JCR Off-Road family. Thank you for watching. One quick word, if you're running our carrier and running a spare tire, you likely will have to relocate this camera. Check out our website for more information, perhaps a video on how to do that, on bracketry, on wiring, and all of that stuff.